took a trip to the East Coast, Washington, New York, and ended up in Connecticut, thus Yale, for a mini reunion with some friends of ours from graduate school. We've known each other a long time, but we hadn't been all together since 2007. Prior to that. So we had a lot of catching up to do. And being architects, we had a lot of projects and things to talk about. And I was particularly interested in telling my friends about our new house that we're planning to build right here in Billings, Montana, on a lot over here by North Park, that's going to have some special features. Number one, it won't have a connection to the city water system or a well. It won't be connected to the city sewer or have a septic system. It won't be connected to the city or to the public utilities for gas and electricity. And we're planning to grow a substantial amount of our own fruits and vegetables right on our own site. And in spite of my obvious enthusiasm for this really big idea, the first question that came back to me was, keeping in mind that most of these people are from the East or the West Coast, but nevertheless, was, why would you do that? And maybe you all are wondering, why would we do that? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Why would we do that? And then we're going to talk about how we're planning to do what we're setting out to do. And finally, what have we learned on our venture so far? So first, we have to start in the long ago days, back in the early 70s, when as a newly minted high school graduate in 1972, in the fall of that year, I packed up a trunk, we used to do those, a bike, I put my bicycle in a box, got on an airplane and flew off to the Bay Area of California to a university campus that I'd never seen before to study architecture. I wanted to study architecture. For a kid from Montana, though, that was a pretty big shock. I went from a place that I knew well with friends and family and long views and big skies and all the things that we love about this place to a place where I didn't know anyone with a very different climate and lots of cars. So as it turned out, in the second year that I was there, in the fall of 1973, we had the first Arab oil embargo, the first energy crisis. And this, I was stunned at the impact that sudden shortage and then high price for gasoline had on life in this very car-centric world that I now found myself in. And it raised some questions with me that I'd never really thought about before, because when I left Billings, gas was 25 cents a gallon. It was just there. And so all of a sudden, what if gasoline weren't readily available? What if it was, in fact, expensive? And it's led me to examine these questions over a long period of time. What was true then is certainly at least as true, or if not more so now, that all of modern life's processes and systems are driven either directly or indirectly, in large part, by fossil fuels, and oil is probably the predominant one. From transportation, food, the things that we make, the things that we build buildings out of, and of course the buildings themselves and how we heat and cool those. So I got to thinking, could oil be in short supply? What would happen if that were to take place? So let's start with oil. It's important to remember that the commercial extraction of oil only began in 1859. Prior to that time, we burned almost no oil. We had coal, which we've been burning for about 100 years prior to that, but we weren't using oil to any significant degree. And now today, 32 billion barrels a year. So up to this point now, we've already consumed 1 trillion barrels. Estimates are that the total reserves on the planet might only be 2 to 3 trillion barrels. At today's current consumption, 32 billion barrels a year, in 30 years, we've burned another trillion. That's assuming that there's no increase in demand, and nobody's suggesting that. So that means in the next few years, we may well reach what's called peak oil, the point at which we've reached maximum production. Demand can continue to go up, but production is not going to go up. So I believe that by 2060 or so, we're going to be at the end of the oil era, and that from that time forward, we're going to look back and call that period, that 200-year period from 1860 to roughly 2060 as the oil era, the age of unintended consequences, a time of great madness. So let's look at some of the unintended consequences. Population growth. When we started from the dawn of man until the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in about 1750, human population had only increased to about 500 million. By the dawn of the oil era, we were at 1.1 million. Today, 7 billion. Today, 7 billion. So what changed that allowed that exponential growth in human population? Oil. It's the exact same curve that has occurred, which has allowed the production and distribution of food and goods on a massive scale. But who knew that taking all of that tens of millions of years worth of stored carbon and burning it in 150 years and putting it back in the atmosphere was going to have any impact? Well, nobody. Nobody asked, but here we are. We've put all that carbon back in the atmosphere, and it's beginning to change the composition of the atmosphere, which is having, from a geologic standpoint, a dramatic increase on global average temperatures. And what does that mean? We don't know for sure, but things are changing, and we may be involved in a game of Russian roulette that we can't stop. In addition to that, because of the burgeoning human population and the changing climate, we're wiping species out at a rate unprecedented since the asteroid hit the Earth 65 million years ago. So again, we don't know exactly what that's all going to mean, except that we're all interconnected, and it's never happened before in human history, so the outcome may not be positive. All of these things together really suggest that we're trashing the planet. So I believe that we've got 4 elephants at least in the room with us. Peak oil, population, global warming, and species extinction. And it's critical that we find a new way to live and build on this planet that is far less consumptive of natural resources, that reduces and then eliminates the burning of fossil fuels, and that is far less damaging to the environment, or Alan will be us. And the elephants will crowd us out of the room. So that's kind of the big picture why. The next question is, why Montana? Why specifically Billings, Montana, as a place to build this house? Some of those reasons are personal. I live here, but more importantly, I know this place. I know the climate of this place. I know the moods and rhythms of this place, and I love this place. That's important because if we're going to design it in a sustainable way, we need to understand the place that we're working with. And also, Montana happens to be perhaps right in the center of what is perhaps the only large land area left on the planet that isn't done yet. And in some respects, isn't done yet means isn't ruined yet. And so that presents us with a tremendous opportunity. We're a small population in a vast landscape. We still have an opportunity here to make our own future, and we can make it a sustainable future. And lastly, I love our climate. Let's face it, it's tough. In just the last 80 years, we've recorded temperatures in Montana that range from 70 below zero down here on the low end to 100, near Helena, to 117 degrees above zero at Glendive. A 187 degree temperature spread, which as far as I can find is the most extreme in a space that small on the entire planet. In addition, most of Montana is semi-arid. Water is precious. So if we can figure out how to build sustainably in this place with this kind of a tough climate, we should be able to figure out how to do it anywhere. So how do we, the question then is, can we make sustainable attainable, and if so, how? So we didn't, of course, always have oil and other kinds of energy inputs. So I looked at a lot of other places, other cultures, other times for ideas and for information about how to begin to think about that process. And it turns out we have an excellent example right here in Montana. The Plains Indians of this part of the country, this part of the world, of course, lived in this environment, this same tough environment, for hundreds of years, and not just lived here, but thrived here. How did they do that? From our perspective today, we'd say they had a minimum of means, but they clearly didn't. They approached their whole life in a very different way and utilized the resources available to them. But more importantly, frankly, it wasn't a technological approach. It was a deep understanding of place and their place within it. And it worked an effective way to fuse life and place into one seamless whole. And unlike when I was a kid and I thought that a teepee was just 4 sticks and an old blanket, it turns out to be really a marvel of simple sophistication. And with a few simple moves, raising and lowering the sides and so forth. You could turn it from shady and breezy in the summertime to snug and warm in the wintertime. And on top of all that, it was very lightweight and able to be moved around. So now the question is, for me, can we take that kind of understanding of place and that simplicity of means and somehow fuse that with today's technology to create a new and different type of architecture that can both satisfy our physical needs for shelter on the one hand, but also connect us emotionally and spiritually to the place that we live? Can we make sustainable attainable? And that's exactly what we're going to try to do with the Urban Frontier House that we're planning to build here. So for this house to be something that can be applicable to more than just my family and myself, we established 8 important goals. Starting with an urban site. We want to build the house on a small urban lot because there just isn't enough planet left for everybody to have their 10-acre ranchette outside of town. Secondly, a budget that's no more than conventional new construction. Third, no off-site utilities. We're off the grid. The house has to take care of itself. Fourth, because this is really important, we aren't going to live in teepees and move them around. And I don't want to live in a mobile home either. So it has to be comfortable by today's standards. It has to be low maintenance. If it can't take care of itself, it takes a lot of attention, then again, it's not going to work. It has to be easy to operate. If you need a rocket scientist in every house to make this thing work, that's not going to happen. It needs to be replicable and it needs to be scaled. So starting with those things, then we looked for some energy sources that, from a human standpoint, are free and unlimited. Start with the sun. When the sun burns out, we're gone anyway. And gravity. So the sun and gravity are available all the time, everywhere, and always free. So with those 2 energy sources, used both passively and actively, we're going to use those to make this house work. So let's talk about the house. This is the fun part. So we start with something that's really basic, really simple, that almost never gets done, particularly in the housing world, and that's over there orientation. And all that means is understand your site. Know how the sun works in the wintertime and how it works in the summertime, where the wind blows from, all those kinds of things which just get ignored. We just build houses as if that doesn't make any difference, but it's so simple if you just position the house to take advantage of what that local place has to offer. And that's, so we start with that. Secondly, the building shell, the building envelope. If we can make the envelope do a lot of the work, then we don't have to have big, sophisticated, fancy heating and cooling systems to keep the indoor environment comfortable. So in our climate, which is relatively dry, but also hot and huge temperatures range, insulation and ventilation are the keys to success. So we have, you can see here, we deliberately drew this with very thick walls and roof because that's what we're going to have. Very high levels of insulation all the way around the house, not just above ground, below ground. Because if you don't insulate the foundation, that becomes like the drippy faucet. It becomes your major heat loss. So by having those kinds of levels of insulation, and in the summertime that keeps the heat out, in the wintertime we will collect heat from the sun, keep it in the house, and not radiate it back out at night and the rest of the time. In the summertime, we have, again, because we're a hot, dry climate, we have pretty good temperature range, typically on a daily basis. Highs might be in the 90s, but lows are typically around 60 degrees, 65 degrees at night. So we can take advantage of that temperature differential, and by just having windows and skylights that open, and we can create stack ventilation, cool the house at night, close it up during the day, and then with the great levels of insulation, we don't overheat during the day, and it keeps the house comfortable. So that moves us then to water. Again, we don't get a lot of water here, but we start by having very low water consumption appliances and faucets and showers, that sort of thing in the house. So we drive the need for water down, then we can collect the water that we need from what falls out of the sky, and we store it in the basement in cisterns. And we start with the rainwater that's collected is treated and used for potable uses. That's things that you can drink, so sinks and showers and that kind of thing. The drain water then goes into a gray water recycling unit, which treats the water, and we can reuse that water for dishwashing and laundry. That goes back into the gray water, so some of that water is just recycled. And then we also use the gray water for irrigation because we're going to grow fruits and vegetables on site in a very water conservative way. And then black water, which is what comes, that's your toilets, that's completely separated because why spend a ton of money on treating water and making it really clean, putting it in the toilet and flushing it away? So we're not going to use very much water, and we take the amount that we do and we put it in a composter, and we let biology take over and do the work for us. And then we come up with a useful soil amendment when the cycle is complete. And that leads us to energy because we still want the big screen TV. My wife still wants her weapons of mass construction. So we've got to have some electricity to make these things work. And again, we're going to take advantage of the sun with photovoltaic panels on the roof and a wind generator to generate electricity, put that in a battery, and that will provide all the power that we need. So what have we learned so far? We've learned that we started with 200 years ago. We built in a fairly simple manner, but it was a shelter that was pretty inefficient, pretty inexpensive. We took that shelter, we move it forward, and we've started to add, with the advent of inexpensive energy, lots of complicated systems to try to make that work a little better, but in fact it's still inefficient and that's now become expensive. We're trying to move to smart, where we really take advantage of what the place has to offer and we can be more efficient and less expensive. Secondly, drive demand down, as I said. If we don't need a lot of energy and water inputs, then we can, the systems become a lot smaller, which is the third thing. With small systems, then we can, they're not very expensive. So, and lastly, we have now learned that sustainable is attainable. It's attainable now, and we can just like that, and that's what I'm doing right now. But if we're going to save the planet one building at a time, and we must, there's no better place to start than here. There's no better time than now. We do live in the last best place, and if we want to keep it the last best place, then we need to do the whole thing in a very different way. I appreciate your time. Thank you.